No painel 3, Políticas de Biometano e Biogás da Dinamarca, teremos uma apresentação de case gravada com o diretor técnico da Associação Dinamarquesa da Biogas, Danish Biogas Association, o senhor Bruno Nielsen.
Yes, hello to everybody. I'm Bruno Nielsen from the Danish Biogas Association, and I'm very pleased to be able to present the Danish biogas model, but also a few words about the European biogas and biomethane policies. I'm the CEO of the Danish Biogas Association, and I've been working here since actually before the establishment more than 25 years ago. The Danish Biogas Association is the organization for all the stakeholders in the biogas sectors, both the producers of biogas and biomethane, but also the users, the companies, and the private households using the biogas. We have the biomass suppliers, we have the technology and equipment suppliers, consultants and knowledge institutions, and actually also the financial sectors. Our mission is, of course, to promote the production and use of biogas, but remember that biogas is only, the energy leg is only one of the two legs in the biogas sector. The other one is the handling of waste and organic resources and turning that into nutrients. We're also spending quite an effort in capacity building and knowledge sharing among our plants. If you look into the development, the recent 30 years, you can see on the left-hand side the biogas production and in the different sectors, agricultural-based biogas plants, you can see there has been a rapid increase in the production in recent 10 years, whereas the biogas production from landfills and from industrial biogas plants and wastewater treatment plants has been rather constant. On the right-hand side, you can see the relative origin of the biogas, and you can see that 30 years ago, 60% of the biogas actually came from landfills or from wastewater treatment plants. But due to of course, the increase in the agricultural-based biogas plant production, the relative share has increased from 40 to 90%. The decrease in the biogas collection from landfills is mainly due to that we have not been allowed to put organic residues into landfills for more than 30 years. Right now, we are in a situation where more than 35% of the livestock manure is digested anaerobically in biogas plants in Denmark, and almost 40% of the natural gas consumption has been substituted by biogas. The Danish model is very simple. We take organic residues from agriculture, either livestock manure, liquid slurry or deep litter manure with a lot of straw, or it could be organic catch crops clover grass grown by the organic farmers to collect nitrogen from the atmosphere. We mix that in the digesters with all kinds of residues from agriculture, households, industry, service sector, and so on. And please remember that the biogas plants are mainly a fertilizer factory. All the nutrients in the livestock manure and all the nutrients in the organic residues from industry or households is being recirculated and reused as fertilizers in agriculture. And of course, this is very important for especially the organic farmers, because they cannot buy chemical fertilizers to apply to their crops. And then we have, of course, the biogas. I normally call that the byproduct. It's a very important byproduct because it makes the economy in the biogas plants, but biogas is also very important in the green transition of the energy sector. And the backbone in the energy sector will, of course, be windmills and solar panels and electricity. But biogas has the role to supply in those hours where there's no sun or no wind. And of course, we also have a specific role in those sectors that cannot be electrified. The energy-intensive industry or in the heavy-duty transportation. So the model is that based on residues from agriculture, industry and households, we turn that into sustainable fertilizers with reduced climate and environmental footprint, and the biogas fill the gap in the green transition, especially in those sectors where electricities do not meet the need. What are the sources of biogas in Denmark? On the left-hand side, you can see the inputs in tons, and see that 75% of the feedstock is livestock manure, and 1/3 of the produced biogas actually comes from livestock manure. Waste from industry or households, or even glycerin from the biodiesel production, is 20% of the feedstock and gives origin to half of the 50% of the produced biogas. Energy crops grown with the only purpose of producing energy, is not very predominant in Denmark. Actually, less than 4% of the feedstock and less than 10% of the produced biogas comes from maize and other energy crops. And from August the 1st, 2025, it will not be allowed to use maize at all in the Danish biogas production. But you can see the biogas production is based on residues we are cleaning up behind the livestock and behind the households and behind the industries. What are the resources to produce biogas in Denmark? You can see this slide. The total potential in 2040 and in 2020, 2025 and 2030 is only the stepping stones until we can totally utilize the resources. In total, the potential is slightly more than 90 petajoules of biogas or biomethane, and that's actually the current consumption of natural gas in Denmark. So we can totally substitute natural gas by biogas and biomethane produced from livestock manure, liquid manure, or deep litter, solid manure, or industrial waste, or residues from food waste from households or from agriculture. And the main big unutilized source is straw from the barley and wheat production. This is the methane content of the biogas. Then we also have the CO2 content, and of course the CO2 can be utilized in the power-to-X production of either electromethane or electromethanol. And you can see that this means that we can store a lot of electricity from the windmills, turning that into a fuel by utilizing the CO2 content. The reason for the rapid development in the Danish biogas sector is, of course, the framework conditions. Until 2012, we only had one subsidy, that was a feed-in tariff for the use of biogas for the production of electricity. In that energy agreement, the Parliament decided to add especially one new feed-in tariff to upgrade the biogas into biomethane and inject the biomethane into the gas grid. And there were 3 other minor support schemes for use direct in industry, or direct use as a transportation fuel, or use as for heat production. Those 3 subsidy schemes never really came into action. But the main reason for the rapid development was the upgrading subsidy and the production of biomethane. You can just see the actual levels of the feed-in tariffs, the one we had for electricity, and the additional. And the most important thing is that the additional subsidies is regulated according to the natural gas prices. This means that when the natural gas prices goes up, then the subsidy will decrease, and the opposite, when the natural gas prices decrease, then the subsidy will be increased. So there is a stable economy for the producers. The additional temporary subsidy was just to speed up the process. But you can also see here the reason why those 3 additional subsidy schemes never have had any importance is because the support is at a lower level. What has happened due to these changes is on the left-hand side you can see actually the same development as you saw in one of the first slides. You can see the whole increase in the biogas production is going into biomethane. It's being upgraded. But actually, this slide is cheating because many of the old electricity-producing biogas plants has shifted from producing electricity and into the upgrading and injection of the biomethane into the gas grid. And then also the production of biogas to be used directly, mainly in industry, has also increased. And actually, the biggest Danish dairy company is the largest consumer of biogas in Denmark. But you can see a rapid switch from 0% of the gas being upgraded and 10 years ago, and now more than 80% of the gas is being upgraded. And this is very important because now we produce storable renewable energy. The biomethane can be put into the subsurface gas storage facilities for an hour or a week or actually a year. And this is a very large storage facility that has a very big impact for the security of supply in the Danish energy sector. Just to give an impression of the volume of biomethane we can store in the gas grid, if we instead took electricity to produce electromethane and stored the electromethane in the gas grid, then we could actually store 1/3 of the annual consumption of electricity in Denmark. Or to give a better view of that, if that electricity was used to fuel Teslas on a parking lot, then this parking lot could go 13 times around the Earth. So it's a huge storage facility we has, and we have the ability to stabilize the energy sector in Denmark. The forecasts for the green transition from the Danish Energy Agency is that the consumption of natural gas will keep on decreasing, the biomethane or the biogas production will increase, and within the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years we will totally substitute natural gas in Denmark and have a 100% renewable gas supply in Denmark. It might be a couple of years before or a couple of years later, but we do have the subsidy schemes and the framework conditions to meet that very large share. And of course, this is also due to the market model for the biomethane. When the biomethane is upgraded at the biogas plant, of course the molecules will go to the nearest consumer. The energy content is a commodity that's traded on the market, but what happens when the biomethane is injected into the gas grid is that it's turned into gas. It's no longer biomethane. But the producer will get a certificate. It used to be a national Danish certificate. Now it's a guarantee of origin based on the European Union Renewable Energy Directive. And this means that for every 1 megawatt hour of biomethane that's being injected into the gas grid, the producer will get 1 guarantee of origin. And when a consumer wants to make a green choice to use biomethane rather than natural gas, then he has to buy these guarantees of origin. So now we have a system where there is a value on the green value. The green certificate has a very high value, and actually every month the Danish biogas producers can decide whether they want to get the subsidies or they want to produce unsubsidized biogas and then have a higher value in the market. More than 80%, actually more than 85% of the guarantees of origin to Danish biogas producers is actually being exported to our neighboring countries, Sweden and Germany, or to other countries in the European Union. So now we have turned from a situation where the biogas plants were local energy producers supplying the local district heating systems with heat and the grid with electricity. Now we are on a European market and can sell the gas to any consumers within the European Union. And of course, the gas grid is very important. This is the transmission net, receiving normally natural gas from the North Sea and going through the transmission net out through the distribution net to all the consumers all over Denmark. But you can see the yellow dots here, they are the new biomethane plants that has been constructed within the recent 10 years. So now we are turning actually the gas grid from a one-way supply of fossil fuels into a two-way transmission system where we can take the biomethane from up north, where the production of biomethane is higher than the gas consumption, and now the biogas is being pushed backwards into the system and perhaps even to Sweden or to Germany. Here you can see the Danish biogas plants. Most of them are in the western part of Denmark. That's simply because the livestock production is in the western part of Denmark. Here you can see a few pictures of Danish biogas plants. Small, centralized cooperative established some years ago, and now it has been acquired by a big waste treatment company, because they want to have the biogas plants as one way of handling the food waste they collect in the capital of Denmark. A farm-scale biogas plant established by a pig producer up north in Denmark. A big cooperatively owned biogas plant down south in Denmark, owned by 70 local farmers. And this is an example of a new biogas plant where there were some local investors 3 or 4 years ago. Now it has been acquired by big investors in Denmark. But we have had a shift in the framework conditions from going from the specific feed-in tariffs I told you about. This support scheme has now been closed down. But the clever thing is that all the producers that were within the subsidy scheme and those that had made irreversible investments, they are guaranteed the support for a 20 years period. Then we got a new system based on tenders. It was adopted in the Parliament 4 years ago. It has not yet come into force, and actually we have proposed to the Parliament that we should skip this tender system, and instead we should go totally for a market pool where we could have CO2 reduction obligations for the suppliers of gas, or we could have a natural gas reduction obligation, so that we could actually go from a subsidy scheme driven development into a market pool system. The framework conditions in different sectors, of course, the energy policy is very important, but just as important is the agricultural policy. 15 years ago, the Parliament has to adopt new legislation on agriculture to reduce the leaching of nitrates into the aquatic environment. The politicians decided to also put in some positive incentives, investment grants for the construction of new biogas plants. We got a resource strategy 10 years ago saying that we should reuse 50% of the household waste, starting to source separate the food waste and not sending that to incineration plants, but send them into biogas plants so that we can still collect the energy content, but we can also recirculate the nutrients. We got a very ambitious climate law in Denmark saying that by 2030 we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 70% relative to 1990. and all the industrial sectors has got an obligation to draw up a plan to meet the 70% reduction. There were 14 climate partnerships, and out of those 14 climate partnerships, 10 of those asked for more biogas. So biogas is a very important tool in the green transition of several energy sectors. Of course, food waste is very important. We source separated in the household. It's been sent to a pre-treatment power plant where the collection bags, but any impurities are being removed, and the pulp are delivered to livestock manure-based biogas plants, and the digestate goes back as a fertilizer on land. Our predictions is that by 2030 we will digest perhaps 2/3 of livestock manure and 1/3 of the straw. And this is very important because the number one political issue right now in Denmark is the introduction of a greenhouse tax on biological processes. This means that the farmers will have to pay a CO2 tax for the emission of methane from livestock or from livestock manure. And here the biogas plants is a very important tool, because in the biogas plant we collect the methane that would be emitted from the storage facilities of the livestock manure. It's the light green part here. And on top of that, we will also reduce the emission of greenhouse gases from the energy sector when the biomethane substitutes natural gas. So this is just a projection of how much we can reduce the emission of greenhouse gases in the coming years. And to give you an impression of the value of the biogas in the pig sector, you can see here when the livestock manure or the pig manure is stored, as farmers normally do, there is a high emission of methane. If that livestock manure is brought to a biogas plant, then we will reduce the emission of methane from livestock manure, bringing back digested livestock manure, and we will reduce the emission of methane on that farm from that level to that level. And in addition, we can substitute natural gas, and we can actually reduce the emission of CO2 equivalents with 50%. If we could get livestock manure on a weekly basis or a daily basis out of the stables into the biogas plants, we can actually reduce the emission to a much lower level, actually more than 90%. And this is very important for the Danish pig producers, because when they do not have an emission of methane, then they will not be punished to pay the coming greenhouse tax. It's the same in the cattle sector. In a European perspective, of course, what's very important in Europe right now is the situation after the Russian invasion in Ukraine. We used to import a lot of natural gas from Russia. European Union is trying very hard to be independent on Russian gas, and draw up this plan, Repower EU, saying that we should increase the European production of biomethane from the current 3 billion cubic meters to 30 billion cubic meters by 2030. This is both by converting some of the current biogas production used locally to produce electricity into biomethane, but it's also due to the installation of a lot of new digesters. And the projection says that we need to have 4,000 smaller biogas plants with 4 million cubic meters per year, and 1,000 large scale, that's what we are building in Denmark right now, with 16 to 20 million cubic meters of biomethane production per year. So there will be a huge development in the European Union. Just to wrap up, the biogas sector in Denmark is based on circular economy, taking all the residues from household and agriculture, putting into a biogas plant, producing biogas that used to be used in a CHP plant, and of course the digestate goes back as a fertilizer in agriculture. Now we're looking into more dry matter, more solid biomasses, straw or grass. This means that there will be more dry matter in the digestate, and we probably will start separating the delivering of the liquid fraction back as a fertilizer, and the solid fraction could go into a pyrolysis plant where we could recirculate biochar into the soil. We have shifted from the CHP plants to upgrading, and right now the methane goes into the gas grid or to the current consumption. The CO2 is being emitted into the atmosphere, but the CO2 will be very important in the future because we simply need the CO2 in the power-to-X sectors to turn electricity from solar panels and windmills into methanol, electromethane, or into plastics and so on. So just to wrap up, I hope to see you all in Denmark to October this year, where we will host the Nordic Biogas Conference, where there will be a two-day conference program and several study tours where you can visit Danish biogas plants, but also see the newly developments with the add-ons, pyrolysis, separation, electromethane production, and so on. Thank you very much.